Alira, Arbin, and Drayton were names no one spoke aloud in Liverpool until the city discovered the darkness they hid behind ordinary faces. What seemed like quiet streets and everyday life was actually the stage for a chilling network of manipulation, fear, and control that had operated in plain sight for months. Liverpool woke up every morning looking the same. Buses hissed at stops, shop shutters rattled open, and people moved through the streets with familiar routines. The city carried a sense of confidence shaped by history, music, and pride. On the surface, nothing felt wrong. Yet beneath the ordinary rhythm, a quiet unease had begun to settle, unnoticed by most and ignored by many. In several neighborhoods, small signs appeared that did not seem important on their own. A young person stopped showing up to work without explanation. A flat was suddenly abandoned, belongings left behind as if someone had left in a hurry. Late at night, unfamiliar cars lingered too long before disappearing. These details blended into the background of city life, dismissed as coincidence or personal choice. Liverpool had always been busy, and people came and went every day. Police reports quietly increased, but they told no clear story. Each case looked different. Different ages, different locations, different circumstances. Some were recorded as missing persons, others as unrelated incidents. There was no obvious link, no shared suspect, and no clear timeline. Investigators struggled to see a pattern, and the files were slowly buried under newer priorities. What made the situation more dangerous was how normal everything appeared. Streets were well lit. Cafes were full. Neighbors greeted each other without fear. The crimes did not happen in dark alleyways or abandoned buildings. They unfolded within everyday spaces, hidden behind doors that looked no different from any other. This sense of normality acted as a shield, allowing something harmful to grow undetected. Rumors circulated quietly within certain communities. Some spoke of people being manipulated, others of exploitation that never reached official channels. Fear kept many silent. Shame kept others hidden. Without witnesses willing to speak, the truth stayed locked away. The city continued to breathe, unaware that trust itself was being used as a weapon. Authorities believed the situation was under control. Liverpool had faced crime before and survived it. There was confidence in existing systems, in experience, and in procedure. Yet this threat did not behave like others. It avoided violence that drew attention and relied instead on patience and planning. Every move was designed to leave no trace. As days turned into weeks, the quiet pattern continued. Life carried on as usual, while something dark operated just out of sight. The calm streets became part of the disguise. The absence of noise became the loudest warning, though no one recognized it at the time. By the time the city would realize what had been happening, the damage would already be deep, and the truth would be far harder to face. The investigation into Liverpool's rising number of mysterious cases began slowly, almost imperceptibly. What at first seemed like random incidents soon revealed a hidden structure beneath the chaos. Detectives started noticing faint patterns. Certain areas were repeatedly mentioned in reports. Specific types of apartments were rented and left abandoned, and some commercial spaces were used for no obvious purpose. At first, these connections seemed coincidental, but over time, they formed a map of something larger, something deliberate. The network that emerged was small but remarkably organized. Members maintained strict codes of behavior and secrecy, knowing that exposure would destroy their operation. They operated in layers, each with a defined role, minimizing the risk of discovery. Some acted as scouts, identifying targets and tracking routines. Others managed logistics, finding apartments or vehicles for temporary use. At the top, a few individuals coordinated movements and decisions, ensuring that each action remained invisible to the outside world. The precision was unsettling. What shocked investigators most was the way the network blended seamlessly into the fabric of the city. Late-night cafes, Car washes and seemingly ordinary apartments became meeting points, all disguised under the guise of normal business or residence. The gang avoided drawing attention by keeping operations limited and carefully calculated. They rotated locations frequently, making it almost impossible for authorities to predict where they would appear next. Even digital communication was cautious. Messages were coded, erased, or routed through multiple devices to hide any trace. The sophistication of the network suggested planning and discipline far beyond what anyone had anticipated. Unlike other criminal groups that left a trail of visible signs, this operation relied on subtlety. Silence was their shield. Trust was their weapon. They targeted individuals who were isolated or vulnerable, ensuring that even if someone escaped, it would take time for connections to emerge. For law enforcement, this made the investigation frustratingly slow. Evidence was fragmented, witnesses were rare, and patterns were buried under layers of deception. Despite the secrecy, small cracks began to appear. A careless message, an unnoticed detail, a fleeting photograph, each offered tiny glimpses into the network structure. Investigators started to map relationships between locations, linking previously isolated incidents. They realized that what had seemed like random disappearances and minor crimes were part of a coordinated system operating right under the city's nose. The discovery of this hidden network shifted the investigation entirely. It was no longer about isolated cases or random events. It became a hunt for an organized system, one that thrived on secrecy, discipline, and manipulation. The more detectives uncovered, the more complex the network appeared. Each revelation brought new questions. How many were involved? How had they remained invisible for so long? How could a city as populous and monitored as Liverpool allow such a system to operate undetected? By the end of the initial investigation, it was clear that the network was both highly organized and dangerously invisible. Its presence in ordinary spaces, homes, streets, businesses, made it nearly untouchable. Liverpool had a hidden underworld, one that thrived on normality while hiding a dark and calculated reality. The discovery marked a turning point, revealing that the city's surface calm masked a system operating with chilling efficiency, and that understanding its structure was only the first step toward dismantling it. The gang's method of operation relied on a disturbing but effective tool: trust. They understood that fear alone would not control their victims. Manipulation and deception were far more powerful. Their targets were carefully selected people who appeared vulnerable, isolated, or searching for connection. These individuals were approached with offers that seemed harmless at first, sometimes even kind: a ride home, help with a job, or the promise of friendship. At first, nothing seemed unusual. The danger was invisible, disguised as normal human interaction. Social media became one of their most powerful instruments. Profiles were monitored, posts analyzed, and interests noted. Invitations to private events or messages of encouragement created a sense of connection. Slowly, the gang built a psychological web, making their victims feel understood or needed. Once the first step of trust was taken, it became increasingly difficult to see the threat lurking beneath. By the time the danger became apparent, escape was rarely simple. The gang had anticipated nearly every reaction, every hesitation, and every attempt to seek help. The way they lured people was methodical and calculated. They often presented themselves as ordinary, even helpful, members of the community. Some posed as mentors, friends, or figures offering guidance. Others acted as companions in social settings, ensuring that their victims became dependent on the relationship. The gang's patience was extraordinary. Days, weeks, or even months could pass before the trap was fully set. During that time, victims were isolated subtly, their routines monitored, their confidence eroded. Once someone was entangled, the gang's control became more overt but still hidden from outsiders. Threats were implied rather than explicit, often relying on guilt, shame, or fear of exposure. Victims were made to believe that seeking help would worsen their situation or bring judgment. Digital evidence could be manipulated or erased, leaving no proof of coercion. Many felt trapped not only physically but emotionally, their sense of safety eroded by the very people who had pretended to care. The gang's operations were not limited to a single location. Apartments, cars, and rented spaces were rotated to avoid detection. Even places that seemed safe friends' homes, local cafes, public parks, could become instruments in their control. Each environment was carefully chosen to isolate the victim from potential support, ensuring that the manipulation continued uninterrupted. Their methods created an invisible prison, one where freedom existed only as an illusion. For investigators, understanding the pattern was critical, but extremely difficult. The victims' stories were fragmented, and evidence often came too late. Authorities had to piece together timelines, locations, and digital trails to reconstruct events that the gang had intentionally obscured. Every small detail mattered. A missed message, a deleted account, a changed route home. These traces slowly revealed the systematic nature of the operation, showing that it was not random, but planned with chilling precision. The psychological impact on victims was profound. Fear, confusion, and self-doubt became constant companions. Even after escaping, many struggled with trust and normal social interactions. The gang had weaponized human emotion, turning the natural desire for connection into a trap. Their ability to manipulate trust, combined with their careful planning and invisibility, made them far more dangerous than a simple criminal. It was a system designed to operate silently, extracting control and secrecy from the very people who thought they were safe. In the end, the luring was not just about physical access, it was about controlling perception. Victims were led to doubt themselves, their surroundings, and even the help offered by law enforcement. Trust, normally a source of safety, became the most powerful tool in the gang's arsenal, and it was the reason they remained invisible for so long. Their manipulation was subtle, almost imperceptible, and it left scars that were invisible to the outside world, but devastatingly real. As the gang continued its operation, the trails of its victims grew colder by the day. People vanished from routines without warning, leaving friends and families searching for answers that seemed impossible to find. Phones went silent, social media accounts stopped updating, and daily patterns were abruptly broken. What initially appeared as a minor disappearance soon became a part of a growing puzzle that confounded authorities. Each case seemed isolated, unrelated to the others, but slowly, subtle similarities began to emerge. The victims often left no obvious signs of struggle. Apartments were locked behind closed doors, possessions left untouched. Sometimes, personal items were deliberately scattered or removed to create confusion, making investigators believe that departures were voluntary. In other cases, digital footprints were carefully erased, messages deleted, and location histories altered. Every step was calculated to obscure the truth. For law enforcement, it became a race against time, a battle to catch patterns before the trails went completely cold. Investigators faced the immense challenge of connecting the dots. Every disappearance initially seemed unique. A young woman missing after work, a student failing to return home, an individual disappearing from a bus stop. At first, each report was treated separately. It was only after weeks of painstaking analysis that similarities began to emerge. Certain areas were repeatedly referenced, minor details overlapped, and digital records, when recovered, pointed toward a coordinated effort rather than random acts. The realization that these cases might be linked sent shockwaves through the investigative teams. The gang's method relied heavily on creating invisibility. They avoided violence that could draw attention, relying instead on subtle coercion and isolation. The disappearance of a single person could easily be dismissed as ordinary circumstances. Yet collectively, the absences formed a pattern. Families were left with frustration and despair, often fearing judgment or blame, while the authorities struggled to identify a common thread. Every unconnected report allowed the gang to operate further under the radar. The missing persons became more than just individual cases. They were part of a shadowed network of control. The gang rotated locations and altered routines, ensuring that no consistent environment could be tracked. Even witnesses who might have noticed suspicious activity were either ignored or never fully aware of the danger. Public spaces, once considered safe, became part of the operation's concealment. Life in Liverpool continued outwardly as normal, masking the underlying chaos. Every attempt to uncover the truth revealed another layer of the gang's sophistication. CCTV footage offered limited insight, often showing only fragments of movement. Digital records, when recovered, were incomplete or deliberately misleading. Each investigation demanded careful analysis, cross-referencing, and patience. Even small details, like a fleeting car in a residential area or a brief interaction at a cafe, became crucial pieces in the emerging puzzle. Despite the efforts of law enforcement, the victim's absence created a sense of helplessness. Friends and family were trapped in limbo, unable to act or understand the forces controlling their loved ones. For the city, this slow realization became chilling. The danger was not in visible crime or violent acts, but in a carefully orchestrated invisibility. The gang's skill at erasing traces and manipulating circumstances meant that Liverpool was teetering on the edge of awareness, only beginning to grasp the scale of what had been occurring quietly in its neighborhoods. By the time patterns became undeniable, weeks and sometimes months had passed. The city had unknowingly allowed a system to function, one that thrived on absence, silence, and misdirection. The vanishing trails were not random. They were deliberate, precise, and calculated, leaving only confusion in their wake. What looked like ordinary gaps in life was, in reality, a meticulously crafted network of disappearance, isolation, and control, invisible to most, but devastatingly real to those affected. The breakthrough came unexpectedly, in a moment that seemed almost trivial at first. A routine traffic stop on a quiet Liverpool street revealed something no one had anticipated. Officers noticed a car parked oddly, its driver nervous and evasive. At first, it seemed like an ordinary incident, a minor violation, nothing more. But when the officers looked closer, they discovered a hidden phone tucked under the seat. It appeared insignificant, yet the contents inside would change the course of the investigation entirely. The phone contained messages, images, and location data that had been carefully coded. At first glance, it was almost unreadable, a series of numbers, symbols, and blurred photographs. But as analysts began to decode the patterns, a clearer picture emerged. The data revealed repeated movements across the city, links between certain apartments, and the frequent presence of individuals at multiple locations. Suddenly, what had seemed like isolated cases now connected, forming a network that investigators had only guessed at. Every detail mattered. Images of car interiors, street corners, and apartment hallways, often appearing random, were actually markers. They indicated meeting points, routes, and temporary safe houses. The gang had been documenting their own movements, unintentionally leaving a digital trail. Analysts could trace the movements over days and weeks, uncovering rotations and schedules that had previously been invisible. The realization was staggering. This network had been operating under a disciplined system, and now, for the first time, law enforcement had a key to understanding it. Even more surprising were the messages themselves. They revealed careful coordination between members, instructions for handling victims, and methods for erasing evidence. Every communication had been intended to remain private, yet in the hands of the police, they became a map of the gang's operations. The level of planning and foresight was astonishing, showing that these were not impulsive criminals, but individuals operating with methodical precision. Each file, each image, added another piece to a puzzle that had confounded investigators for months. The location data provided insight into the gang's geographical strategy. Apartments were rotated frequently, often in busy neighborhoods, so that no one residence could be traced back repeatedly. Vehicles were swapped, and meetings were arranged in crowded public spaces, where casual observers would notice nothing. Even places considered safe for victims' cafes, libraries, or shopping areas were sometimes used as points for manipulation or monitoring. The gang had taken ordinary city life and turned it into a mechanism for control, using the very normality of Liverpool as camouflage. This unexpected discovery sparked a surge in investigative activity. Analysts worked tirelessly to map every connection, every movement, and every relationship revealed by the phone. Surveillance teams were mobilized, patterns cross-checked with missing person reports, and small leads rapidly expanded into a comprehensive plan. For the first time, the gang's network was no longer invisible. It had a shape, a structure, and a rhythm. The significance of the clue could not be overstated. What had begun as a minor stop had unlocked a door into the hidden world that had operated undisturbed for months. Suddenly, investigators were no longer chasing shadows. They had a guide, however imperfect, that allowed them to anticipate the gang's next moves. The seemingly random disappearances, the vanishing trails, and the unexplained absences all began to make sense. This single moment revealed the organized, calculated, and chilling reality of a network that had once seemed untouchable. From that point onward, everything changed. The investigation gained focus, urgency, and direction. The gang could no longer operate with the same freedom, and for the first time, the possibility of dismantling the network became real. What had once been a collection of isolated mysteries had now formed a pathway into the dark underworld hidden in Liverpool's ordinary streets. It was a discovery that would set the stage for the unraveling of the entire operation. As the investigation intensified, the full extent of the gang's deception became horrifyingly clear. The group had mastered the art of hiding in plain sight. Members lived ordinary lives during the day, blending seamlessly into Liverpool's neighborhoods. They shopped in supermarkets, walked dogs in parks, and attended local events, appearing indistinguishable from any other resident. Their public personas were carefully cultivated, projecting normality and even trustworthiness, which made it almost impossible for anyone to suspect their true activities. Surveillance revealed that the gang's operational method relied heavily on mobility and disguise. Apartments, cars, and meeting spots were constantly rotated to avoid detection. They frequently switched residences, sometimes staying for just a night before moving to another flat in a completely different part of the city. Even their digital identities were fluid. Social media accounts were frequently deleted, recreated, or masked behind fake profiles. Anyone trying to track them would encounter dead ends at every turn. Investigators discovered that the gang's members were organized in layers. Some were tasked with identifying potential victims, observing routines, and gauging vulnerability. Others handled logistics, including transportation, temporary housing, and supplies. A few high-ranking members coordinated activities, ensuring that every movement was deliberate and timed. There was no chaos, no reckless behavior. Every action was part of a controlled plan designed to maintain secrecy and dominance. One of the most unsettling revelations was how ordinary their daily lives appeared. Members held jobs, interacted socially, and contributed to the community in ways that made them almost invisible. This dual existence, ordinary citizen by day, predator by night, created a stark contrast that shocked investigators. People who had unknowingly crossed paths with them in everyday situations could not have imagined the sinister reality lurking behind the friendly smiles and casual greetings. The gang's adaptability was another factor in their success. They responded quickly to potential threats, such as increased police presence or digital monitoring. If an apartment became risky, they abandoned it. If a communication method was compromised, they shifted to another system entirely. Even victims who managed to escape found that the gang could anticipate certain behaviors, making it difficult to find safety. The network was fluid, flexible, and resilient in ways that law enforcement had rarely encountered. Evidence from surveillance, phone records, and witness reports slowly unveiled the psychological methods the gang used. Isolation, manipulation, and fear were applied with precision. Victims were conditioned to doubt themselves, feel shame, and hesitate to seek help. The gang's ability to operate invisibly relied not just on physical concealment, but on controlling perception. Those outside the operation saw nothing suspicious, while the victims were trapped in an invisible prison of threats and dependency. The realization of how deep the gang had infiltrated ordinary life was chilling. Ordinary interactions, public spaces, and daily routines had been weaponized. Their success depended on the city's indifference and the assumption that danger always looks obvious. Liverpool's streets, bustling with normal activity, had provided the perfect cover. For many victims, the psychological impact was profound. Years of manipulation, isolation, and coercion had left scars that could not be easily healed. Some felt guilt for the circumstances they had been forced into, even though the blame lay entirely with their captors. Others struggled with anxiety, distrust, and the fear that danger could reappear at any moment. Support networks, counseling, and careful monitoring became essential for helping them rebuild lives, piece by piece. Recovery was slow, and each step forward was hard-won. The city itself faced difficult questions. How had such a coordinated and hidden network managed to operate for so long without detection? Liverpool's authorities realized that prevention and awareness had to improve. Public campaigns, better communication, and proactive monitoring of vulnerable populations became priorities. The case exposed not only the criminal network, but also gaps in the systems meant to protect citizens. The investigation also served as a lesson in vigilance. The gang had thrived because they exploited normality. Recognizing that danger could appear in familiar places became crucial for both authorities and the public. Community engagement and education were key to ensuring that future threats could be detected. Liverpool's residents began to understand that appearances could be deceptive, and attentiveness was protection. Law enforcement learned equally important lessons. The case highlighted the power of persistence and digital evidence. Investigators discovered that small clues, overlooked at first, could accumulate to reveal the larger picture. Surveillance, forensics, and coordination proved essential in dismantling a network that seemed untouchable. Despite the arrests, the emotional aftermath lingered. Families and communities were left processing relief and grief. Healing, both personal and communal, required time, attention, and acknowledgement of the suffering caused. In the end, Liverpool emerged with a sharper awareness of its vulnerabilities and a renewed commitment to safety. The case became a cautionary tale, demonstrating how easily trust can be exploited. Survivors' stories began to be shared, helping others recognize warning signs and seek help sooner. The city had survived the ordeal, but it had been forever changed, reminded that vigilance is essential. The collapse of the network marked the end of one chapter, but the journey of recovery had only just begun. Liverpool's streets, once again bustling and bright, carried both the relief of safety and the memory of the past. The story served as a warning. Crime can hide in plain sight, but with courage, even the darkest networks can be exposed. The city had learned that while evil can thrive in secrecy, truth and justice are powerful enough to bring it into the light.